There are 4 words pre-med students work tirelessly to hear. Congratulations, you've been accepted. There are many paths that can ultimately lead to that end, but on every single one of them, students will encounter things like needing to complete their required coursework, hours upon hours of studying, the MCAT, and then the entire application process. And all of that has to be done before reaching your ultimate goal. It can be extremely stress-inducing, lead to a lot of questions, and unfortunately, give rise to self-doubt. I experienced all of that, and I'm going to share some of the key moments and major events that happened to me on my path to med school. Hey, how's it going? My name is Jack Lucero, and if you're new here, which is pretty much everybody, I'm a first-year med student at the George Washington University. Today I'm going to take you through my personal timeline and path to my acceptance to med school. But before we get started on that, I just want to mention that I previously made a video titled How I Got into Med School, and I'm going to allude to that a few times in this video. However, that video was more of a deep dive into my stats and my exam scores. So if you want more detail on that, feel free to go and check that video out. Anyway, my path began 7 years ago in Provo, Utah, when I began my undergrad at Brigham Young University. Now, at that time, I was a much younger, more naive version of myself, and I didn't really know where I wanted to end up. I knew I eventually wanted to get involved with politics, and so I thought that the best path for me was maybe law school or business school. And so I was just doing some of the pre-business classes while I was there and then filled my gaps with generals. Now I quickly learned that the business school route was not for me. I just didn't enjoy it very much, and that year academically ended pretty bad. But I moved on from it, and I actually then took a 2-year gap from school to complete a service mission for my church. I went to the Washington, D.C. area, and it was there that I decided that I wanted to go to med school. I was heavily involved with the different communities through various service outlets, and I realized that I wanted my life to mirror that service. And I also realized there how poor public policy making can severely impact and hurt people's lives. And I want to be part of making that process better. And so I returned back to school 2 years later, and in the fall of 2017, I changed my major from accounting to biochemistry, and I was truly on the path to med school. And very quickly, I learned that I made the right decision. I was doing a lot better academically, I was really liking my classes, and I was always eager to learn more. However, I knew that if I wanted to get involved with health policy, I needed to get some experience with that. And so I applied for a health policy research internship at a small nonprofit organization in the Washington, D.C. area called Men's Health Network, and I was accepted. So I headed back to D.C. to start this internship, and I absolutely loved my time there. While I was at MHN, or Men's Health Network, I was involved with lots of projects ranging from basic health policy research to helping with the health fairs that MHN sponsored. And then some of my favorite projects were working directly with congressional offices where I saw firsthand the public policy making process. And it was frustrating, to say the least. I also learned that the people that we were leaving these healthcare decisions to, which are extremely important decisions, really don't have much experience in the healthcare field. Only 3% of Congress actually has any real healthcare background, like they were a doctor or had some work experience in healthcare. And so that also made me want to go to med school. There were a lot of starts to projects that we had, but we never really saw the ends of them because it was just so difficult to get to that point. And so my internship at MHN really solidified my plans to go to med school. So again, went back to school fall of 2019 to start my junior year. And during this time, I was also dating my now wife. And the reason I mention that is because she was an integral part of my path to med school. She was by my side through the whole thing, through the good parts and the very stressful parts. And there were a lot of stressful parts. and she supported me the whole time, and I know that I would not be where I am right now without her. So I start studying for the MCAT, and I personally did not do a self-study program. I just knew that wouldn't work for me. I know plenty of people who've done it, and a lot of them scored much better than I did, but for me, I just knew that wasn't gonna work for me. So I signed up with a test prep company called Altius, and they have a very set schedule for the MCAT. And so there are basically 4 parts to it. You read their textbook, which pretty much has all the information in it that you need for the MCAT. And then you learn that information, and the way that I learned it was through Anki flashcards. And if you haven't heard of Anki, it's just a spaced repetition based flashcard system. And if you're planning to go to med school or looking at that, you'll definitely get more familiar with Anki. And then throughout the week, I would complete lots of practice questions on my own, and then there was a group setting that we would do those in as well. And then every few weeks, we would take practice tests. And the practice tests were amazing. They were identical to the real one in terms of formatting and how they felt, and they were extremely helpful. In total, I took 15 practice tests. The first one I took, I scored a 495, and then the last practice test I took was a 517. So there was some big improvement there. Now, I didn't score that well on my real one, but I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So yeah, my MCAT studying, read the textbook, do my Anki cards, complete the practice questions, and then take the practice exams. So I had my MCAT test date scheduled for May 16th of 2020, and I was going to take it in DC because my wife and I were planning on getting married shortly before that, and then heading to DC to complete some internships that we had. Obviously, COVID hit and our internships were canceled, and so I changed my date to May 29th and to Denver because that's where we were going to be that summer. But then just a couple weeks later, the May 29th date also got canceled along with our wedding. And so there was just a lot of stressful things going on at this time, as there was for everybody. But I was in the dark for a couple weeks or until the new MCAT calendar was released. And then I scheduled my day for June 19th. So pretty much a month later than what I had originally scheduled it for. So that might have had some impact on my score, but that was just one part of it. So I keep studying. My wife and I ended up getting married on May 1st, so that was a big stress reliever. And then June 19th rolls around, and I go and take the test. I feel extremely nervous that morning. I was kind of a nervous wreck. But then when I got there, I kind of calmed down and I went and took it. And then 6 hours later or whatever it was, I walked out of the testing center and I was not feeling good about it. I just didn't think I was gonna score very well on it. And that led me to one of my biggest mistakes with my application, and that was that I waited 4 weeks to get my score back until I submitted my primary application. So I didn't submit my primary until mid-July, which was pretty late in the cycle. So my advice to you is that if you're applying this cycle, just submit your primary application as soon as you can. It'll help. And then immediately, like literally the very next day, I started getting my secondary essays. And funny enough, the very first one I got was actually from George Washington. And so I started working on those, and they took me a while. I didn't finish the last one until the very beginning of October. And then it was kind of just a waiting game to start hearing back from schools. And at this point, that's when I started getting lots of rejection letters. And those were not fun to get, but I knew it was just part of it. But that was kind of part of that self-doubt. I just kept thinking, man, I just keep getting these rejections. I'm not going to get in anywhere. But then finally, at the very beginning of November, I got some good news, and it was an interview invite from George Washington. And they scheduled it for the beginning of December. And so I had about a month period where I was waiting to do that interview. Then the interview day rolls around, and I thought it went very well. It was 2 virtual interviews. One was with one of the admissions committee members, and then that one was really good. I thought it was a comfortable conversation, and I was really happy with the way that I performed in it. And then the second one was with a third-year medical student, And that one was definitely less formal than the first one, but still it was a good conversation. We were kind of going back and forth and just talking about life, and it was just a good interview day. So that was done, and then it was just another waiting game to hear back. But still, I'm getting more and more rejections. But then finally, on January 19th is when I got those 4 magical words: congratulations, you've been accepted. I remember I was teaching a small chemistry class that I was a TA for at BYU, and I peeked down at my phone because I got a notification, and on the subject line I just saw like congratulations or something like that. And I just internally was so excited. I wanted to start celebrating, kind of jumping or whatever, but I couldn't because I was teaching. And so I finished up teaching, and as soon as I was done, I went and found my wife and then asked her if she wanted to move to Washington, D.C. And she immediately knew what that meant. And so then is when we could celebrate, and we were very excited, and it was a really awesome moment. And then it also meant that it was kind of just like smooth sailing until graduation. Like I just had to get there to graduation, and then I could enjoy my summer until the start of med school. So there you have it. That is my personal timeline and path to medical school. I hope it was helpful and that you enjoyed it. Maybe it answered some of your questions. But if you do have any more questions, I would love to answer them, or I'd also love to know at what point on the path you're at. Like maybe you're just an undergrad right now, or you're studying for the MCAT, or maybe you're in the waiting game right now, just waiting to hear back from some schools. But wherever it is, I'd love to know. So thanks for watching. That's it, and I'll see you on the next one.